The Truth Girls.
Hi everyone. The three terrorist attacks, so-called terrorist attacks that we had last week, the government and the media are trying to pass this off as an act of Muslim terrorism, somehow possibly connected to ISIS or some other group, although there is evidence to the contrary and no real evidence to support their claims. On Monday, Couture-Rouleau ran over two police, killing one of them in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. On Wednesday, Zehaf-Bibeau shot a soldier at a war memorial in Ottawa and then tried to barge into Parliament to shoot more people. And on Thursday, a man named Zale Thompson attacked 4 cops in Queens with a hatchet. They say that Couture-Rouleau he was a convert, a French-Canadian convert, and he had been radicalized. When you look at the history, well, he had been arrested in July and his passport seized, but then they had to let him go because you can't just arrest people for thought crime. He had problems with his identity, maybe was a bit delusional. He was kind of alienated or alienating himself from his family and reinventing himself as a Muslim and possibly schizophrenic. The Ottawa shooter had supposedly planned to travel to Syria. He had a criminal record and he also had a history of drug use. And while he was in Ottawa, he was actually staying in a homeless shelter. And at one point, he had apparently asked a BC judge to send him to jail. This guy was a crackhead, and he was such a desperate drug addict that he had actually asked to be put in jail. He seemed to believe that this was the only way that he could quit. And he was a Muslim and yet a crackhead, so he had a kind of inner conflict about this. He was a crackhead staying in a homeless shelter who had said, "Put me in jail, or I'm going to do something to make that happen." And isn't that what he did? I tried to find out more about Zale Thompson, and this article, which says he became a radical on his own, also paints a portrait of a disturbed individual. The guy was involuntarily discharged from the Navy, but then continued to wear his white Navy uniform for quite a long time after that. He was a recluse, according to his family, and he had once threatened to kill his landlord when he was facing eviction. So it looks to me like all three of these people had some kind of mental illness. I think that's probably the real issue here, that there's not the right kind of services and help for people who have psychiatric problems. Well, that's one of the issues. And just as a side note, religious fervor, sudden religious fervor, is something that's associated with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. It says here, included on the list of mania and hypomania symptoms is increased focus on religion or religious activities. Not only a symptom of bipolar, but also schizophrenia, schizophreniform disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and other psychotic disorders. So in other words, it's common with people who are mentally unstable. But the issue of whether these people really had mental illness and why they were not able to get help, that's not what's being focused on, and rather, the government is exploiting the attacks on the military to push the security agenda, which really comes as no surprise. Even though they have no evidence tying them to ISIS or anything, they want to call it terrorism, so they're calling it the rise of the lone wolf terrorist. I'm actually kind of really disgusted because, as far as I can tell, these were 3 really disturbed individuals, like I said. They happen to be Muslim. It happened in the same week. I mean, that already right there, the fact that 3 of these happened in the same week seems a bit odd. But then, after all this evidence comes out that these were just 3 crazy people, they still try to blame Muslim extremist groups. If you think about it, I mean, on one hand, they tell us that ISIS is this huge organization, well-funded, well-organized, and then they want to tell us that they're sending out a crazy man with a hatchet, a guy who likes to dress in a sailor suit, to attack police. Is that the best they can do? I somehow doubt it. And as for Zehaf-Bibeau, you know, the guy was a drug addict, and the way it is, at least in Quebec, if you have a drug problem and other mental illness problem, it's very hard to get help. He had been seen by psychiatrists, and psychiatrists said yes, he had unstable moods, but it wasn't enough to diagnose him with a mood disorder like bipolar. It's very hard to get help because the two are handled separately. So if you have a drug problem, you go to a psychiatrist, they're going to say, go get help for your drug problem first. Because, you know, what kind of progress can you make until you've addressed that? Then if you go to the, you know, the drug addiction services, they won't address your other psychiatric problems. So if you're bipolar and you're a cocaine addict, you go to the rehab, but then you probably won't do very well because you are, after all, bipolar also. And that's going to make it very hard for you to straighten out. So they can't help you, and neither can the shrink. So who's going to help people like that? It's very difficult. You end up with a lot of people in the street, actually. And there's a couple other weird things about this incident. One of them was that the smiling officers, pictures of these smiling officers were snapped just before the hatchet-wielding radical attacked them and left one in critical condition. I guess coincidences happen, but this is really strange. It just so happens that just at that moment, a photographer was there taking pictures of the four rookies, and then moments later they were attacked. You can imagine how distracted they would have been if someone was taking their picture. But, I mean, the timing, you know? And the other thing was that I saw the footage of the police chasing Zehaf-Bibeau. I mean, he just shot someone at the war memorial. Where are the guards? How can this guy even get away and get to a car and then hijack the car and make it down the street? How is that even possible? And then, you know, he manages to drive all the way down the street. You know, I've seen Roscoe P. Coltrane do a better job on the Dukes of Hazzard. I mean, as far as police chases go, it looked like they were on Valium. It just seemed like they weren't really trying that hard. And how could there even have been an unsecured entrance at the Parliament? Aaron and I went to the National Assembly in Quebec this summer, and there was plenty of security. There were guards, you had to go through a metal detector, give your ID, get a badge. I mean, you couldn't just barge in there. Anyway, funny how the phone should ring just when I was about to suggest that maybe these guys were Manchurian candidates. Coincidence? You know, maybe they were crazy. Either they were crazy or maybe they were some kind of like mind control sleeper agents, because what's the chance that there's going to be 3 of them in 1 week? I'm just throwing it out there. But the one thing I really don't think they were was bona fide terrorists connected with any kind of organization. So, you know, either the government should do something about mind controlled Manchurian candidate assassins, or they should do something to improve mental health services in Canada. That's what I think. So thanks for listening to me. And leave me your comments, and I'll see you next time.